They paraded her in front of the crowd, her wrists raw and her eyes hollow, a rare specimen meant to be sold to the highest bidder. But as her tears fell on the cold auction floor, a single human stepped forward, his gaze steady and voice like thunder. In that moment, she realized freedom might still exist, and that one stranger could break every lock, not just the ones on her chains, but the ones around her heart. She didn't remember when the first chain had been fastened to her wrist. Perhaps it was during that long night in the rain-soaked alley, when she had crawled through garbage to find something, anything, to eat. Or maybe it was much earlier, when the elders of her clan told her she was born to serve, that her strange blue skin and shimmering silver eyes were signs of impurity, a cosmic mistake to be corrected through obedience. She had obeyed, because there was no other choice. Even when the cuffs dug deep enough to bruise, even when the elders spat at her feet and called her worthless, she lowered her head and carried on. Until the day they sold her. They wrapped a heavy iron collar around her neck and loaded her into the transport cage. Her long hair, once her only pride, hung in matted ropes over her shoulders, tangling around her half-bare back. Her blue skin, so bright and alive once, was smeared with mud, old blood, and the filth of many hands shoving her around. Her ears rang from the constant jeering, worthless hybrid, half-breed waste, pretty blue pet, living scrap. The cage door slammed shut. The jolt rattled her bones. Outside, someone laughed. She curled tighter, knees to chest, trying to fold herself into something too small to be seen, too quiet to be noticed. But no matter how she tried to vanish, the humans and other aliens who gathered at the trade post looked eagerly at her cage, whispering about how exotic she looked. That bright blue skin, the fine-boned face, those two human eyes that seemed to glow faintly when she cried. They called her Specimen now. The auction hall was large and circular, ringed with towering iron bars. Rows of seats surrounded a small stage in the center, the floor of which was stained from old trades and cruel games. Overhead, lights flickered and crackled, buzzing like flies over carrion. Guards dragged her from the cage, her chains clinking loudly against the cold floor. She stumbled but was yanked upright, forced to stand on the stage. Her eyes scanned the crowd, faces blurred together in a mass of greedy hunger. Her heart thudded so violently she felt it echo in her skull. The auctioneer, a thick-bodied alien with a sharp snout and too many gleaming teeth, bellowed, "Here she is. A hybrid with rare pigmentation, see the glow. A once-in-a-lifetime chance to own something truly unique." He yanked her hair, forcing her head back so the crowd could see her entire face. She gasped, the sudden pain bringing a fresh tear. She caught glimpses of bidders, cloaked figures leaning forward, whispering, nodding, waving credit chips. The room became a sea of glinting eyes and snapping jaws. As the bids began to climb, she felt her knees weaken. Her fingers curled into trembling claws. If she collapsed, she knew they would shock her, punish her, drag her back up and force her to perform again. She kept standing. Barely. All she had left was the memory of warm wind through her hair, of starlight she once watched from a rooftop when she dared dream of escaping. Those dreams seemed like another life, a soft whisper that now mocked her in the roaring dark. Someone in the crowd shouted a high bid, and the auctioneer screeched with delight. The guards yanked her forward, so she stumbled dangerously near the edge of the stage. Her toes curled on the smooth metal floor, trying to keep balance, her arms pulled up painfully. The crowd seemed to surge closer, voices overlapping, praising her rare glow, commenting on her perfect proportions, her docile eyes. Her mind retreated further inside, shrinking behind walls she had built long ago. Maybe if she stayed quiet enough inside her head, she wouldn't feel the chains anymore. Through the haze, she heard one voice rise above the rest. It was human. A calm, solid tone, not sharp like the auctioneer's nor mocking like the others. It carried no greed. No coldness. She blinked, struggling to focus. There, among the bidders, stood a human man. He looked different from the others, not dressed in ornate silks or armor, not surrounded by guards or drones. Just plain travel-worn clothing, a dark cloak hanging over his shoulders, a simple utility belt at his waist. His face was partially shadowed, but his eyes, she saw them clearly. They were bright and unwavering, focused only on her. The auctioneer laughed. "A new challenger. Let's see how deep your pockets go, human." Other bidders turned to size him up, some scoffing, some curious. The bids rose even higher. The hybrid girl felt her breath catch, her lungs burning with an invisible flame. The human didn't move or glance at the others. His hands stayed raised. His gaze never left her. Her legs trembled harder now. A thought flickered at the edges of her mind, fragile and dangerous. Could it be? No, it couldn't. Another bid shouted, higher again. The auctioneer shrieked with glee, whipping the crowd into a frenzy. But then, the human's voice came again, low but firm, cutting cleanly through the noise. 1,000,000. The hall fell silent so fast it felt like the air itself froze. Her ears rang. She saw the auctioneer's jaw drop open, drool glistening along the sharp teeth. The other bidders recoiled, muttering curses, some stepping back in surprise. She looked at the human, her throat tightening. 1,000,000? For me? Why? The auctioneer stammered, eyes darting between the human and the hybrid girl. Slowly, he tried to recover his showman's tone. Well. We have a new highest bid. Anyone else? Silence. The guards looked at each other, confused, then at the auctioneer. No one stepped forward. No one dared challenge that bid. The auctioneer swallowed, forced a wide grin, and slammed his staff down. Sold. To the human. Her head spun. She swayed on her feet, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The guards began unlocking her chains, working hastily now, as if they couldn't get rid of her fast enough. Each clink of metal falling away from her wrists and ankles felt like thunder in her bones. The collar was the last to go. It fell heavily onto the stage with a dull clang. Her hand rose instinctively to her throat, her fingers brushing the raw, bruised skin. She staggered backward, feeling naked, unbalanced without the weight of the chains. The guard stepped aside, and the human stepped forward. He approached the stage slowly, never taking his eyes off her. She flinched at first, expecting a harsh slap or a new collar to be thrown around her neck. But he stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scars along his knuckles. He raised one hand, palm open, fingers relaxed, an offering, not a demand. Her breath caught. Why would he offer his hand? Why didn't he just grab me? Why didn't he chain me again? She stared at the open hand for what felt like an eternity. Her heart beat so loud she thought it might burst from her chest. His eyes softened, his voice gentle now, as though he were talking to a frightened animal. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe now. No more chains." Her mind screamed at her not to believe him, that this must be another trick, another layer of cruelty. Yet, something in his voice broke through. Something in those eyes, steady and bright, felt different from every hand that had ever reached for her. Her fingers twitched, hesitated in the air. Then, trembling, they slowly moved toward his hand. The moment their fingers touched, she felt warmth spread through her skin, into her bones, deeper than any chain had ever cut. The human closed his fingers gently around hers, not pulling, only holding. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, slow and reassuring. Her shoulders sagged as if a great weight had fallen away. Her knees buckled slightly, but he stepped forward to catch her, his other arm wrapping carefully around her waist. She sagged into him, her forehead pressing against his chest. The smell of worn cloth and faint smoke filled her nose, not perfume, not chemical sprays. Real. Earthy. Alive. She wanted to collapse, to weep, to disappear into the warmth of his embrace. But she also felt something new and sharp blooming in her chest, something like the first flame of a long-frozen hearth. Around them, the auction hall buzzed with confused murmurs, but neither of them paid it any mind. The human shifted slightly, lowering his head so his mouth was close to her ear. "You're free," he whispered. "No one will ever chain you again. Not while I'm here." Her breath shuddered out of her. Her hands clenched at his cloak, her fingers twisting in the fabric as if to make sure he was real. For the first time since the first chain had locked around her wrist, she felt the faint, almost impossible warmth of hope. And as he guided her gently off the stage, his hands still around hers, his arm still steady at her back, she took her first unchained step into a future she had never dared to imagine. The human guided her down the stairs of the auction stage slowly, never letting go of her hand. The moment her bare feet touched the cold metal floor, a wave of dizziness almost sent her sprawling. He tightened his grip, steadying her, and she realized how weak she had become after so many days, no years, of captivity. She barely noticed the crowd parting in hushed awe, eyes following her every move. She didn't care anymore. All she could feel was the warm pressure of his fingers around hers, the firm support at her lower back. They reached a narrow hallway behind the main stage. The walls were lined with crates and tools, harsh electric lights flickering above. She tried to shrink away from the bright glare, but he moved to block it with his body, sheltering her in his shadow. She peered up at him, her eyes wide and searching. "Where are you taking me?" she managed to whisper, her voice raw from screaming and silence both. He glanced down, his expression softening. "Away from here. Somewhere safe. You'll never have to see this place again." Her chest tightened so sharply it hurt. Safe, she had never even allowed herself to imagine that word could belong to her. He opened a side door, revealing a small hover transport parked in the dark alley beyond. The vehicle looked old, its panels dented and paint faded, but to her it seemed like the most magnificent vessel in the universe. As they approached, he helped her step inside, careful not to jostle her bruised ankles. Once seated, she wrapped her arms tightly around herself, her long blue hair falling like a protective curtain. He settled into the pilot's chair and tapped a few controls. The engine hummed to life, vibrations running through the floor. As they lifted off, she pressed her forehead to the window, watching the auction house, her prison, grow smaller and smaller. For a long time, she said nothing. Every breath felt fragile, as if she might shatter if she exhaled too quickly. Finally, she turned toward him, her eyes shimmering faintly in the low light. "Why?" Her voice trembled, almost inaudible. "Why did you buy me?" His hands stilled on the console. He turned, meeting her gaze fully. "Because you deserve to live," he said simply. "Because no one deserves chains. And because, when I saw you, I knew I couldn't walk away." A tear slipped down her cheek. She caught it with shaking fingers, staring at the droplet in wonder, as though she'd forgotten what tears felt like. "I don't know who I am without chains," she admitted. "I don't know what to do, or how to be." He gave her a small, sad smile. "Then we'll figure it out together." The transport soared higher, leaving the filthy trade districts behind, heading toward the forested outskirts. When they finally landed, he stepped out first and held out his hand again. She hesitated. Then she slid her fingers into his, letting him help her down. They stood under a canopy of starlight. The cold night air carried the scent of pine and earth, so clean it made her dizzy. She shivered, but not from fear. He took off his cloak and draped it around her shoulders, gently tucking her hair aside so it covered her more fully. The fabric smelled like smoke and travel dust, but it wrapped her in warmth she had never known. "This is my place," he said quietly, gesturing toward a small wooden cabin a few steps away. Its windows glowed faintly with a warm, orange light. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like." She stared at the cabin, her mind struggling to process the word welcome. When he guided her inside, the warmth hit her instantly. A fire burned softly in a stone hearth. Shelves lined the walls, filled with tools, worn books and small plants. A kettle simmered on a side table, releasing a sweet herbal aroma. She stood motionless, drinking in every detail as though she might wake and find it all gone. "Sit," he encouraged, pulling a soft blanket from a chair and laying it on the floor near the fire. She obeyed slowly, sinking onto the blanket, her hands clutching the cloak tight. The heat of the flames seeped into her frozen bones, and her shivers gradually faded. He knelt nearby, pulling out a small first aid kit. Her eyes widened as he opened it and reached for her ankles. She flinched. He paused instantly, looking up. "I won't hurt you," he said, voice gentle. She gulped, then nodded, forcing herself to stay still. He carefully cleaned each cut, each bruise, dabbing them with a soft cloth. The antiseptic stung, but she stayed quiet, watching him work with steady, patient movements. He handled her as though she were made of the finest glass, as though she mattered. When he finished, he wrapped her feet in warm bandages and sat back. She glanced down at the clean cloth, at her unchained wrists resting freely in her lap. "It feels wrong," she whispered. "To be unbound. I keep expecting someone to hit me." He lowered his gaze for a moment, pain flickering across his features. Then he leaned forward, placing his hand lightly over hers. "No one here will ever hurt you," he promised. She searched his face for any sign of a lie, but found none. Her fingers twitched, then slowly curled around his. Silence stretched between them, but it was a comforting silence, warm and unhurried. After a while, he rose and poured 2 cups of tea from the kettle. He handed her one carefully. She sniffed it, her nose wrinkling in curiosity at the unfamiliar herbs. When she took a tentative sip, her eyes widened in surprise at the gentle sweetness. A sound escaped her lips, a tiny, startled laugh. She clamped her hand over her mouth, eyes going wide as she looked at him, terrified she'd be punished for making noise. Instead, he laughed softly too. "It's okay to laugh," he said. "It's more than okay." She lowered her hand slowly, her breathing ragged. "I forgot," she said, her voice so small it nearly vanished. "I forgot what laughter feels like." He watched her for a long moment. Then he set his cup aside and moved closer. "You're free to feel everything here. Anger, fear, joy, curiosity, all of it." She turned her gaze to the fire, her eyes reflecting its glow. "I don't know how to start over," she confessed. "You don't have to do it alone," he replied. "One step at a time. You don't owe me anything, I didn't save you to make you mine. I did it because you deserve to live. To choose." Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. "Choose?"
she echoed. Yes.
His voice was almost a whisper.
Choose where to go. Choose who to be.
Choose if you want to stay here, or leave and find your own path. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the cup. He reached out, taking it from her gently, setting it aside. When his fingers brushed her cheek, she leaned into the touch without thinking. Tears welled in her eyes again, hot and unstoppable. She buried her face in his chest, her body shaking with sobs she had swallowed for years. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly but without force, like an anchor in a raging storm. She wept until her throat burned and her tears soaked his shirt. Yet he didn't move away. He simply held her, rubbing small, soothing circles across her back. When she finally stilled, exhausted, he shifted so he could look into her eyes.
What do you want? He asked softly.
She opened her mouth, but no sound came at first. Then, in a broken voice, she whispered, I want to stay.
His eyes brightened.
He nodded, a small, gentle smile blooming across his face.
Then you stay.
As long as you want. Forever, if that's your choice. A weak laugh escaped her lips, the second real laugh in her life. Forever, she repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines, and the stars blinked softly in the velvet sky. The fire crackled beside them, the scent of tea and herbs wrapping around them like an embrace. She looked at her hands, unchained, bandaged but free, and then at him, the human who had shattered every lock she thought unbreakable. Slowly, she reached up, cupping his cheek with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered, her voice unsteady but sure.
For seeing me. For choosing me.
His eyes closed at her touch, a tear sliding down his cheek too. You're not a thing to be chosen, he murmured.
You're a life. A light.
You chose yourself today. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. In that moment, she felt the warmth of his breath, the steady rhythm of his heart, and something deep inside her finally settled. For the first time since she had been born, she wasn't property. She wasn't worthless.
She was someone.
She was alive. And as they sat there, the world outside faded into nothing. In the glow of the fire, with his arms around her and her heart finally free, she began, truly began, to live.